Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I must apologize for the late start. We need a quorum in order to be able to come down to meet with you. And we also have to make sure that things are in place because this hearing is being televised. So perhaps you would have noticed members looking anxiously at the clock while we waited because we can't start until we are given that indicator. I want to welcome you today to this inquiry. I also want to welcome our viewing and listening audience to the 20th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs. Today we begin a very important inquiry. It is the first public hearing into waste management policies and initiatives of the state. The hearing is being broadcast live on Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Members of the viewing and listening audience may send comments or questions via email at parl101, PARL101 at ttparliament.org, on our Facebook page at facebook.com/ttparliament, or on Twitter at ttparliament. Now, having got that out of the way, to notify members of the viewing and listening public of how they can access us during the inquiry as well as afterwards, I want to welcome the officials and representatives of the Ministry of Public Utilities, and I believe from the ministry we have the PS, the Deputy PS, the Senior Planning Specialist, and the Senior Project Manager. I will ask you all later on to introduce yourselves. We have representatives from the Ministry of Planning and Development, the Acting PS, the Environmental Manager, the Deputy Environmental Manager, Senior State Counsel, Managing Director of the EMA. And from the Trinidad and Tobago Solid Waste Management Company Limited, we have the CEO, General Manager of Communication, Sales and Marketing, General Manager Finance and Corporate Services, General Manager Projects and Support Services, and the Corporate Project Administrator. Now, it's a lot of you, but I think it is important for members of the listening and viewing public to know which persons, which human beings fill which positions in the various public agencies which come before us. So if we may start with the Ministry of Public Utilities, would you all be kind enough to introduce yourselves? Just give your names.
Good morning, Madam Chair. My name is Gary Joseph, and I'm the Acting Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Public Utilities.
Good morning. I am Beverly Khan, Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Public Utilities.
Good morning. Arlene Johnson-Lawrence, Senior Project Manager, Ministry of Public Utilities.
Good morning. Melanie Phillips, Senior Planning Specialist, Ministry of Public Utilities.
And Development. Would you introduce yourselves?
Good morning, Chair and members. I am Marie Hinds, the Acting Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Planning and Development.
Good morning, David Prasad, Environmental Manager, Ministry of Planning and Development.
Good morning, Chair. Andrea Julian, Senior State Counsel, Ministry of Planning and Development.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. Marissa Gari, Deputy Environmental Manager, Ministry of Planning and Development.
Good morning. I am Hayden Romano, the Managing Director of the Environmental Management Authority.
Thank you. May I ask the members of the Solid Waste Management Company Limited to introduce themselves?
Hi, good morning, Chair and members. My name is Ronald Roach, CEO of SWMCOL.
Pleasant morning, Chair and members. David Manswell, General Manager, Communication, Sales and Marketing, SWMCOL.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. Maria Along, General Manager of Projects and Support Services, SWMCOL.
Good morning, Chair and members. Abigail Whitehall, Corporate Project Administrator from SWMCOL.
Thank you all. I got a bit confused because normally groups sit together, but I see that you all have been split up, I suppose, because of the numbers of persons attending. I will, after I introduce myself to you, I will ask other members of the committee to introduce themselves to you. My name is Sophia Choate. I'm an independent senator. I chair this committee as an independent senator.
Clarence Rambarat, I'm Vice Chairman of the committee.
Good morning, everyone. I am Cherry-Ann Critchlow-Coburn, member of the committee.
Good morning, all. Taharko Bika, member.
Right. Now, I believe you all have been advised as to what the three objectives of the inquiry are, but I'm going to read them out again because we have a listening and viewing public. Number one, to examine the level of waste production in Trinidad and Tobago. Number two, to assess the effectiveness of regulations and policies directed at waste management. Number three, to assess the adequacy of resources and institutions associated with the management of waste. Now, we try to make our inquiry objectives as simple as possible so that listeners and viewers will be able to follow what we are talking about, which for some may be a complicated and complex process, especially since the whole process is in a system of flux, as I understand it at this time. So the next stage of the inquiry is where I ask three persons to make opening statements. So I'll start with the Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Planning and Development, Ms. Marie Hinds. I'll ask you to make an opening statement of about 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, let me first say that on behalf of the Ministry of Planning and Development, we are truly pleased to participate and to support this process. And we look forward to the recommendations and the outcomes because we believe it will take us further along on the pathway to sustainable waste management. Having said that, we would like all listening to appreciate the fact that the administrative framework for waste management in Trinidad and Tobago is complex. It is shared amongst many ministries, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, Public Utilities, our Ministry of Planning and Development. It is also shared amongst a state limited liability company, SWMCOL, who is here, as well as a statutory authority, the Environmental Management Authority. Then we have THA for Tobago. It is even important to note that the IMA has an interesting role. It may not be so much waste management, but in terms of monitoring of what happens in terms of the coastal environment, the LBS protocol, they manage the extent to which pollution from on land is affecting what's happening in our marine environment. The Ministry of Planning and Development is responsible for the establishment of the country's overarching development policy framework, which you would know as Vision 2030, as well as the National Environmental Policy, the NEP framework, which is currently being revised by the Environmental Management Authority. Both the Vision 2030 and the NEP provide specific policy directives as it relates to waste management, and we would have shared some of those in the submission to you. The EMA was established to regulate and coordinate sustainable environmental management in the country, including the management of waste. In this regard, the EMA, through its Environmental Police Unit, enforces provisions under the EM Act, the Litter Act, and Public Health Act, and have issued cleanup orders and other notices of violations to persons contradicting these acts. It is also important to note that we are in the process of developing the waste management rules, through which it intends to establish requirements for handling and disposal of waste, including standards and design criteria for disposal facilities, and to enforce these requirements through a licensing and a permitting system. Domestic waste collection in Trinidad and Tobago is also the responsibility of municipal corporations. And you can appreciate that the Ministry of Rural and Local Government has coordinating responsibility of 14 municipal corporations. SWMCOL, who is here, they have their specific mandate, and I'm sure they will share more as to what that is. And as we mentioned, there's also a role for the THA in Tobago. So we thought it was important just to set the context so that you can appreciate the breadth and the number of agencies that all have a part to play. As far as the Ministry of Planning and Development is concerned, we continue to work to strive to ensure that at least the policies are as sound as they can be. So thank you.
Thank you very much. That was extremely informative, and indeed fortifies my opinion that this is a very complex area with overlapping, possibly, responsibilities and so on. And I suppose now we will learn how these systems operate, or whether there are things which can be fixed in the systems to make them operate more smoothly. I will now ask the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Public Utilities, Mr. Gary Joseph, to make a brief statement of about 2 minutes.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to deliver brief opening remarks to this inquiry into the waste management policies and initiatives of the state. As you are aware, as was just indicated by my colleague from planning, there's a multiplicity of agencies involved in the management of waste in Trinidad and Tobago. And most would be represented here this morning, including Ministry of Planning, EMA, Ministry of Public Utilities, and the Solid Waste Management Company Limited. Given this scenario, I would hasten to add that the lack of one centralized body for all aspects of waste management has constrained the development of an integrated waste management strategy. Further, the legislative framework governing solid waste management in Trinidad and Tobago, which includes legislation such as Municipal Corporations Act, the Litter Act, and Public Health Ordinance, is indicative of the many entities involved in solid waste management. SWMCOL is one of the major players in the management of waste in Trinidad and Tobago, and the Ministry of Public Utilities has oversight responsibility for this agency. The key priority areas identified for development and which the ministry has an obligation to facilitate SWMCOL in achieving are waste diversion and resource recovery, modern collection, treatment, and disposal infrastructure, waste information management and security systems, cost recovery and revenue generation, and education and public awareness. Despite the challenges experienced during these turbulent times, SWMCOL has been able to successfully meet the objectives of its strategic framework, which is identifiable through major achievements of operational improvements on landfill sites leading to a reduction of landfill fires, establishment of a full-scale material recovery facility at its Guanapo landfill site, establishment of a pilot biological engineered wetland system for the treatment of landfill leachate at the Guanapo landfill, establishment of a pilot curbside recycling project undertaken with the Tunapuna-Piaco Regional Corporation, rollout of the fleet modernization program aimed at replacing the existing fleet of the company on a phased basis, acquisition and commissioning of a mobile tire shredder and a multi-purpose shredder, establishment of a beverage containers recycling facility to treat beverage containers such as plastic bottles and Tetra Packs, a launch of the Get Into Green with SWMCOL Public Awareness and Education Program, and the launch of the Public Sector Recycling Program. The Ministry of Public Utilities will continue to support and facilitate SWMCOL in meeting its mandate and delivering on its intended initiatives so that the agency can continue to contribute to the development of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Chair, I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joseph. May I now invite the CEO of Solid Waste Management Company Limited, Mr. Roach, Ronald Roach, to make a brief statement of about 2 minutes.
Good morning again, Chair and members of the committee. SWMCOL, we are really delighted to be here in what we consider to be a very important issue, the issue of waste management in Trinidad and Tobago. SWMCOL was established in 1980 pursuant to a cabinet decision to implement the solid waste master plan for Trinidad and Tobago prepared by Planning and Stanley Associates Engineering Limited. Prior to 1980, what existed was the regional corporations themselves had the full responsibility for waste management. We were mandated with the responsibility for the management, collection, treatment, and disposal of solid waste in Trinidad and Tobago. However, that full mandate has never been materialized because of concerns raised by the regional corporations about their loss of that responsibility. So currently, SWMCOL manages 3 landfill sites in Trinidad, from which it receives a subvention, and those 3 sites are Beetham Estate, Forest Park, and the Guanapo landfill sites, and they receive about 90% of the country's waste. In addition to landfill management, SWMCOL is involved in commercial solid waste collection and disposal, including general waste collection, special waste, liquid waste collection and disposal, rental of portable sanitation units, and resource recovery services. We also have a role to play in public education. We, as the company responsible for the disposal of the majority of the country's waste, we do recognize and painfully aware of the challenges associated with waste management in the country. However, we believe those challenges can easily be overcome, and it requires arrangement between all the parties involved, including those who are here, as well as the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, and we look forward to being part of the solutions to those problems.
Thank you. Having heard the opening statements, I suspect that even with your input here today and your written input, that we will have further questions for you before we write our report, because it does seem to be quite a complex area. Perhaps I could just get us rolling by posing a question to the PS in the Ministry of Planning and Development. Ms. Hinds, in one of the papers presented to us, I saw that you had referred to studies being conducted in relation to the most efficient manner of solid waste disposal. What was the most recent study, and can we access that as members of the public?
That was referenced, you're referencing statements made in the Vision 2030 document. That said, those are things that are to be done and will be done.
Oh, I see.
Yes, to determine policy regarding solid waste disposal, one of the things we would do is conduct studies to determine the most efficient way. I could only speak to, I know there was a 2010 study, but as to even more specifics, I think I will defer to my environmental manager if he could recall any additional studies that may have been done.
We currently engage in a project at the Guanapo landfill site with SWMCOL, doing an assessment on the levels of contamination. It's a global environmental facility project that's been implemented through the Basel Regional Center in Trinidad and Tobago. I believe they have already did testing during the wet season, and they're currently conducting dry season testing on contaminations on that, which would lead towards developing a plan for remediation for the site.
I think, I don't know if what I'm going to ask will make sense at all. But it seems to me that if there are reports which are proposed, then the institutional memory of the ministry will want to be informed by earlier reports in order to determine whether what was set out in those reports have been accomplished, and if not, if so, why not, and whether things have been accomplished and what benefits have accrued as a result of those things. So that is the purpose, really, of my question of inquiring when was the last report in the ministry with respect to, or has there been any report in the ministry with respect to the most efficient manner of solid waste disposal, let us say?
Chair, I understand what you are trying to get to, and it makes absolute sense. So what we could supply you with, I said I am aware of the 2010 study. It was not necessarily authored by the Ministry of Planning and Development, but I believe it was conducted by the Ministry of Rural and Local Government. At the point in time, they may not have been named that. But we can definitely supply you with any information on studies after this.
Absolutely, that would be extremely helpful because it would give us the historical context and help us with any recommendations we may want to make. We also read about a waste-to-energy initiative. Could you tell us a little more about that, or someone from your team?
Chair, I will begin, and I will defer as necessary. It is really a project under the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. So they are the ones, so we left that ministry out in our little introduction, but they are the ones who've actually put out an expression of interest, asking companies if they're willing to be involved in such an activity as waste energy. I believe this was, the request went out in 2017. I believe that bids have been received, and they're possibly at the point of evaluation of same. But I wouldn't want to cross the boundaries here. It's really a Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries initiative.
Then I should ask, the next question that occurs to me is, how do you all coordinate currently?
You hit the nail on the head so early in the game, Chair. So early in the game. And I think this is what my colleague was alluding to as well, the PS of Public Utilities, in his opening statement. The issue is one of coordination. However, I think it is fairly clear who is supposed to do what. But still, there is no one body, to my knowledge, that says, yes, we have oversight of the entire picture. From the perspective of the Ministry of Planning and Development and our development of the National Performance Framework, we have oversight, or our job is to track it, to see if the indicators, if the targets are being met. And we are in constant dialogue with the agencies and the ministries which are responsible for various parts of the process. But then that's one responsibility. But you hit the nail on the head. To my knowledge, we can improve on coordination, and I will stop there for now.
I understand. Mrs. Critchlow-Coburn, you had a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the submissions provided, it was noted that the World Economic Forum determined that Trinidad is the top waste-producing country in the developing world. When you look at that together with the fact that we are told there is minimal segregation of waste materials, prior to disposal, there is little recycling and reuse of the waste, and we also have limited sites for landfill. This suggests to me, probably the entire committee, that we are not efficiently managing our waste. So what I would like to know is what is being done, one, to reduce waste produced in Trinidad and Tobago, and what is also being done to more effectively manage the waste produced.
I want to defer, from a policy perspective, we have written the documents. We've said we want to reduce it. We've said that we want to do certain things to ensure that waste is managed in a sustainable way. You always start with the overarching documents. I'm quite pleased that we were able to achieve that in terms of Vision 2030. And we're also quite pleased that we're reviewing our National Environment Policy, the NEP, to tighten up on the very specific strategies that would be required. But I'm going to defer to the manager for the Environmental Management Authority, because there is one specific project that is endeavoring to target just what you've asked, and that would be the iCare project. So, Mr. Romano.
Thank you, PS. Yes, following through from the coordination question, the EMA is empowered by its act to be the coordinator of a lot of these environmental issues. And one project that we're doing, which is a Green Fund-sponsored project, and amongst the partners are our line ministry, the Ministry of Planning, SWMCOL, the Ministry of Public Utilities, the IMA, the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development. And this project, which goes under the name iCare, is really supposed to prepare the country for the passage of the waste rules, the EMA waste rules. The EMA waste rules is the only outstanding rule in the suite of the Environmental Management Authority, the EM Act rules. I mean, it's one piece of legislation that is still to be enacted. This, we expect, will be enacted in 2019. We're going through the process. We have a draft prepared that will be submitted to the ministry, and the expectation is after the public comment period that in 2019 the waste rules will become law. But back to iCare. So iCare is about recycling, and it's about all the elements of recycling. It's about reuse, it's about reduce, and it's about, recycling. The government has made a decision, the cabinet made a decision that the solid waste management company will be the company that will be responsible for recycling in Trinidad and Tobago. So SWMCOL already has a facility at NAMDEFCO, which is a material recovery facility, which Mr. Roach will tell us, I'm sure, much more about. And what we're attempting to do, or what we are doing in this project, is really to move in the country into a culture of recycling. We have started and we have some 80 bins around the country where people are bringing recyclable materials. This material is transported by the project, and it goes to the three SWMCOL sites, Forest Park, Guanapo, and Beetham, and then it goes to NAMDEFCO, which is where the material recovery facility is located. So yes, the country is moving towards a recycling culture. I mean, this is a culture change, and therefore we feel it's going to take some time. We are pushing, especially with public education, and we are coordinating. I mean, the public utilities have just started a public sector recycling program, which is being supported by iCare. A number of schools have started programs. A number of private sector entities are very much interested in the iCare project. So I think the iCare project is moving forward, and we look forward to continuing with support from everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Romano. Some of the questions that you will hear coming from us will be questions that we think may be of interest to our listeners. But this one is of interest to me as well as a lawyer, because I always had the impression that the EMA was a regulatory body. So how does that fit in with the more dynamic role which you've described? Or is it that SWMCOL is acting on your advice, or you regulate what SWMCOL does? Could you just clarify?
The Environmental Management Authority, one of its roles is that of regulator. We are also educator. We are also protector of the environment. And we're also facilitator. And this is one of our facilitation rules, where in a number of instances, we enacted rules, the water rules, the noise rules, the air rules. And we didn't have that public education that was necessary beforehand so that the public is prepared for these rules. And we've decided we would not make the same mistake with the waste rules, especially in an island, well, 2 islands, where waste is such a major issue. And therefore, we're using this iCare project to prepare the country, not only individuals, but really companies, because the commercial sector is going to be impacted with the waste rules. So to prepare the country for the enactment of the waste rules, and we're using the business, the company, SWMCOL, who is going to take over, because when this project is completed, and the project has a finite start and a finite end, it morphs into what SWMCOL does as their day-to-day business. So it's really preparation and facilitation, which is all part and parcel of the EMA with respect to the EM Act.
Thank you. Mrs. Critchlow-Coburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a follow-up question. One, I commend that I find the project is commendable, but do you have the necessary support in place? For example, in the constituency, in my constituency, a number of the schools are very much aware about the whole thrust with recycling. So as the MP, they have been asking, could we be provided with bins so that it can recycle? And there has not been a positive response. As a matter of fact, in the constituency, people are interested in recycling. When we look at the number of plastic bottles that are generated on a daily basis, it is a large amount. What is to be done with the waste? And I think that is where we may be falling short, in that persons are becoming aware and they are being educated, but what do they do with their waste? That is the question I would like answered, please.
And I surely would want Mr. Roach to also get involved in terms of the answer. But what is happening with respect to the schools is the first thing that we have to do is to write the Ministry of Education to get approval for us to approach the schools to get bins. So some schools already have bins because we have gotten approval, but we've written the Ministry of Education now to get a wider participation with respect to bins. With respect to communities, our major challenge is that people see a bin and they think it's a garbage bin, not a recyclable bin. So we get a lot of garbage in the bins, and sometimes we have to move the bins because nobody is taking responsibility to ensure that recyclables going into the bins. We are ramping up with respect to our public awareness and education. There are going to be lots more bins, in the communities. We congratulate communities like Cashew Gardens, who have been doing this for maybe over a year now and very successfully. So some communities are already actively engaged. But clearly, we know, for it to become a national project, we need to get deeper into the communities, and we are doing that.
Thank you very much. And to the EMA, you mentioned Cashew Gardens, and that's a good opening for me. Last year on December 21st, I visited the Carlson Field area. There's a lot of discussion in this country now about agricultural lands and what happens on agricultural lands. And in Carlson Field, we have a significant amount of agricultural lands. And I highlighted on December 21st on social media. The story is so ironic. We have a company operating in Carlson Field that is recycling metals. And that area that was previously occupied by Tantique has now been converted into one massive recycling area. The people are handling various items, but items like barrels, for example, and containers which previously had oil. And the oil gathers on the land in pools and finds its way into the drainage system in Carlson Field. Day and night, they are lighting massive fires and burning rubber and other things and polluting that environment. And that to me is something, and that is agricultural land. And I know for a fact that the EMA has had reports, and I would like to know, it's all well and good to talk about law and policy and who is operating in silos and different ministries. But this is a classic example of something happening in full view of the public, and there is absolutely no action on it. The EMA.
Thank you for that, Minister Rambarat. Yes, we are aware of the operation in Carlson Field, and again, through our coordination mechanism with the Commission of State Lands, with the Town and Country Planning Division, with the Regional Authority and the Public Health Authority, we are taking action against that establishment. It never happens as quickly as any of us would like it to happen, but we have to be clear that we're following the correct procedures, we do what we have to do, and action is being taken.
Well, could I be more specific? Could I inquire whether, is there some sort of notice that has to be served on them? And if so, have they been served?
I know the notice of violation, because it will be a breach of an environmental requirement. The notice of violation was being prepared. It's not one that I have followed up on, Chairman. So I can get back to you, with respect to what's the status of the notice of violation.
Well, this brings me to perhaps part of our problem is timely responses. So for a fairly big difficulty like that, what is the average time that you would take to investigate, prepare notice, and have it served?
Because of the size of the operation, it could take us a couple months. Reason being is that sometimes, we want to ensure that the facility doesn't have approval from some other agency with respect to operation. And therefore, again, the need for coordination, the need to get responses, timely responses from other agencies with respect to the approvals for whatever is the land use in the area. And that is sometimes a challenge, and that's why sometimes it takes that length of time. Also, in some areas, getting who's the owner of the property could also be a challenge. So it all depends on the nature, the scale, and the location of the activity.
Is it that the EMA is under-resourced in terms of the provision of personnel? Because first, let me explain why I asked the question. Because it seems to me that in this day and age, when we have email and WhatsApp and so on, even if a WhatsApp group is formed amongst the leaders in the ministries to say, could you have your person check to see if a notice has been sent? That is something that could be verified very quickly. So I think that a 2-month period seems to be a bit excessive. Would you agree?
I won't agree. I mean, with respect to whether the EMA is under-resourced, I mean, I don't know any agency that can say that they have all the resources that they require. So I think that's that's a given throughout all our agencies. We are in difficult financial circumstances, and all of us are required to do, I mean, more than our so-called job descriptions. I mean, that is also a given. So yes, we are under-resourced. Whether or not the timelines are where they should be, I think we are improving. I think we're doing much better than we did maybe a year or two ago, because for the first, the EMA was focusing on getting the regulations in place. So you had the NEP to do. You had all the various rules to put in place. Now just the waste rules are outstanding. So the focus was getting all the legislation in place, and then it was permitting, doing all the permits. Now I would say within the last year, the focus is changing to monitoring and compliance. And therefore, I think we are going to be seeing, I know we're going to be seeing improvements in terms of monitoring and compliance. And we're hearing from the public, that we are improving with respect to monitoring and compliance.
Now, forgive me, because we're really down to 3 members. So if you keep hearing my voice asking questions, it's just that the Secretariat has provided me with a bit more information than my colleagues have. So to keep the session going, you may hear from me more often than the Vice Chairman of the committee and from Senator Obika. I am not sure, Mr. Romano, if this question should be directed to you, but PS in the Ministry of Planning, would it have made more sense for ICARE to be simply given to SWMCOL to run with? Having regard to all of the other things that the EMA is responsible for.
I'm going to defer to, of course, the Managing Director to share his thoughts on that. But I want to take us back just one little bit, just in terms of, because I know that the intent of this committee is to truly understand the processes and understand what happens behind the scenes in agencies and ministries such as ours. And when we speak to the issue of resources, it is not per se only, because I see where you're going, focus on what is your mandate and let other people do the other things. It is not so much only a case of bodies sitting in a chair, but it is also a case of systems and how procedures and these systems in different sectors and agencies, how well they work. If you are to take somebody to court, and you would appreciate this, you've got to be absolutely certain that your ducks are lined up. And that thing about knowing who the owner is, as simple as it sounds, it is quite challenging. So when Mr. Romano says that it takes some months to make sure, what he's alluding to make sure that you have the information accurately so that you can then present yourself in court, because once you submit a notice, you're going in a particular direction. And there have been instances, if this is not well done, then after all of the hard work, it just falls down. So I am aware that there is work taking place, even in the registrars of the RGD, that will improve and help us to be able to do our work better in order to be able to get that kind of data much more quickly. Because now at this point, your search clerks go in. I know that there are in some cases, we have quite a few deeds that are already scanned and available, and you have access, but not all. So it's a ZIVMA process, and I just wanted to say that in terms of how resources are used and who is doing what. We admit it is a challenge, but I just needed you to appreciate that it is not a simple matter. It's not always a case of just delaying. The value of the technology is a good one, but there is still room for improvement. And I suspect even now while I'm chatting that Mr. Romano is sending a WhatsApp message to his people to inquire as to the status of that particular notice. Now, I will defer to Mr. Romano to say his thoughts on whether ICARE should stay with us or if it should go to SWMCOL and when.
Thank you for that, PS. And yes, I am sending a WhatsApp. However, I mean, we are also, I mean, in terms of improving efficiency, the EMA is actually launching ISO 9001 certification, on the road to certification this morning. And, well, of course, I have to be here, but because, you know, everybody else is at the launch. ICARE, as I said, is a green funded project. SWMCOL would not be able to access the green fund. And therefore, this is the reason why the EMA is facilitating the project. Because at the end of the day, though, I mean, SWMCOL is going to be the people that's going to continue with this project to ensure that Trinidad and Tobago, I mean, recycles and is best practice with respect to recycling.
Okay, thank you. So there was actually an easy answer to that question. How is that having an impact on the EMA? I mean, is it creating a kind of dysfunction because you have to now devote a considerable amount of your personnel and so on to the ICARE program to liaise with SWMCOL? That's like one line of activity. And on the other side, you have to deal with certification, regulation, and all of the other matters that you are required to do. Is there any way, is that creating a difficulty? And if it is, then is there some way in which that can be resolved?
Well, we're fortunate. It does not create a difficulty because projects in the EMA is handled by a separate projects unit. And the projects unit, well, don't meet with the regulators, is separate from the regulators. So the EMA as regulator and the EMA as projects is separate. And the projects, of course, support themselves. So the projects unit is supported by funds from the project. So it does not, I mean, it does not impact on the operations of the EMA. So it's quite a good situation for us. But it also assists because the people involved in permitting in the regulations in the EMA get to work closely with these projects to see what they're doing great, what they can do better, and what they can do differently. And of course, the EMA is a public educator. I mean, so we need to always be involved in public awareness and education.
Thank you. I know there are many people in the room. Don't think that we are ignoring you or we don't have questions for you. It's just that I'm trying to keep a sort of logical flow going with respect to the issues that we are looking at. Now, the Vice Chairman raised an issue with respect to pollution taking place on land in Central. But who is responsible for addressing situations where, let's say, you have oil discharged from a tanker in the Western Peninsula? Who is responsible, and is there any method by which the perpetrator can be found and punished or made liable or fined? How do we deal with that as a country?
As a country with respect to pollution, we do have the National Oil Spill Contingency Plan, which is managed by the Ministry of Energy and Energy Affairs. However, the plan speaks to a certain level of spills, and therefore small spills like what we had in Chagaramas or this week in Carenage really do not fit into that plan. So what we have been doing as the agencies, as the various agencies, the Ministry of Energy, the Maritime Services Division, the IMA, and sometimes the regional corporations where this thing happens. I mean, we have been coordinating amongst ourselves to ensure that action is taken. What we need to do and what we're trying to develop, because in the EM Act, I mean, another section that we have not implemented, Section 61, speaks to spills. And that is something that we need to work on, again, with the other agencies to really formulate a clear framework in terms of responsibilities and accountabilities. And that is happening.
To the ministries and agency before us, nothing crystallizes an issue like a nice photo. And I've reposted on my Facebook page the photos from Carlson Field. Because you know what? People out there with us, and we have listeners and viewers, people in the country get very cynical because with all of this that is happening here, the 4 key agencies, rural development is not before us yet. And you have the people in Carlson Field and people in other parts of the country pass this problem every day. They live with it. This didn't happen a few weeks ago, you know. This has been years. And the environmental management legislation is with us 18 years now. Section 58 is very clear. Section 65 is very clear. Section 68 creates the offense. Section 65 gives you your power. And the public will be asking with all this talk and pointing fingers at ministers and saying with all of this discussion, why? If you go back to even the Summary Offences Act, there is provision in there for dealing with what is happening in Carlson Field. And we could go on and on about legislation and policy and green this and I care and you care and we care. But the people in Carlson Field, this morning they would look on and say, nobody care. And if you have heard me in the Senate over and over, I say we as legislators could give the best legislation if the people paid by the taxpayers of this country to give effect to the legislation and not doing their jobs, then all of us will fail. And the people out there who pay our salaries, including mine, would become more and more cynical. I have a lot of questions to ask, but I just want to make that very clear, because when I went to Carlson Field and as I go around this country, I do have the answers. As a minister, I don't have the power to charge or to enforce. And when I do, in fact, go to the limits of my authority and take action, I have people who threaten to take me to court. And I am hearing that agencies with clear jurisdiction are still trying to find out whether they have the jurisdiction. So my question is, what is it with all this duplication and overlap, some responsibilities in the corporation, some in SWMCOL, EMA, public utilities, planning? I want to ask at what stage we will have convergence, because on many issues, food safety, various issues in this country, we hear about these silos and the duplication and the overlap. On the matter of waste management, as the people who are being paid by the taxpayers to sort out this issue, what is the point of convergence? Who is going to stand up and take responsibility for delivering to this country a modern waste management program? The question is to anybody who could answer it.
Somebody has to pull the short straw.
Yeah, I'd like to take a stab at that answer. So, as far back as 1979, when that Planning and Stanley study was done, there was a recommendation for a single central authority with responsibility for waste management, overall waste management. In 1996, another study was done that said the same thing. In 2000, a study was done that said the same thing. And in 2014, another study was done that said the same thing. And that's the answer. To me, the answer is clear. There still is need for a single central authority for waste management. And until that is done, then we will continue to have these problems, and we will continue to deflect and work together in little pockets, which we are doing now, but it will lead to incremental improvements, but it would not solve the problems. That, to me, is the one single solution to the issues that we face.
Okay, and I would just say it would be something like SWMCOL. But how would that central authority or lead authority interface with the municipal corporations which currently have garbage collection and waste management responsibilities?
Yeah, one of the things we have to realize is waste management is quite a specialist field as well. And I mean, it's a question of coordination and having, one of the challenges with the regional corporation now is that they don't have the expertise. They try their best, they do their best, but they don't have the expertise in waste management and simple things like route management for the municipal services that are performed right now. Those things, once you can do those things in a proper manner, and so it can lead to so much increase in efficiency. And we keep on talking about, you know, the challenges with efficiencies, the inefficient collection service, the inefficient disposal service, and so. That central authority will have authority over the waste collection. At the end of the day, the municipal corporations will still have the direct responsibility, but they will be supervised by the Waste Management Authority to ensure that the objectives are met, that the routes are properly planned, that the collection service is done as per schedule, and that the waste ends up at either a landfill or a recycling facility or a waste energy facility if and when that may come in place. And so right now there is no oversight of that function. So if a contractor chooses to dump waste in Carlson Field, there is very little follow-up and certainly no penalties for that contractor. And that sometimes is the unfortunate modus operandi of some of these contractors, because they want to make 2 trips when they should be making one, and instead of reaching the landfill, they just empty it. And so that's the unfortunate reality. And those are the things that a waste management authority will be able to do. SWMCOL was set up in 1980. The recommendation was to set up a waste management authority. SWMCOL as a company was set up, and that has had ripple effect problems from 1980 onwards. We have continued to try to do what we can do without the authority, and so working with the various other agencies like EMA and Ministry of Planning, but it's only so much we can do without having those authorities. I want to add that in the 1990s, SWMCOL, in a capacity of a consultant, went to the OECS countries and made recommendations for implementation of solid waste systems there, including the setup of authorities. Those countries have since then set up authorities, and they all function in the same manner that we would like our system to function. So we have been able to set up those systems in other countries, but in our country, that system still doesn't exist. And that, as I said, it comes back to that lack of authority that we have here.
Okay, yeah, something else. You provided us with some written material, and we would just like to have it shared with members of the viewing and listening public, and the terms understood, because as we go forward, you may be making statements, doing education programs, and using terms of reference, and people don't know what you mean when you say, for example, you use the phrase sanitary engineered landfill. What is that? What is a sanitary engineered landfill?
Right, so in waste management terms, a sanitary engineered landfill refers to a disposal site that has engineering arrangements built into that site for the protection of human health and the environment. What those engineering aspects are include having a leachate system, having an impermeable liner so that and in talking about leachate systems, I need to define what leachate is. Leachate is the product when rainwater seeps through the waste and dissolves the soluble components. The waste in itself, when it degrades, organic waste, and so produces its own leachate. So it's really a liquid substance coming out of a landfill. It's a natural occurrence. But because of the types of waste coming into the landfills, that leachate can be toxic, and therefore it has, as waste management, we need to ensure that that leachate does not end up in the environment. So an engineered sanitary landfill site will have those engineering mechanisms in place for the protection of public health and the environment.
Senator Beaker, I understand you have a question?
Several, but it depends on time, of course.
No, you by all means.
Thanks, Chair. The questions I have cannot be asked furthermore answered in the time permitting, so I will pick from it because waste affects all of us. I will start with the easiest question. From the vacant positions at March 16, 2018, in SWMCOL, I see that 41% of all vacancies are with recycling and recovery. That's 9 vacancies. And just at a glance, if 41% of your entire vacancies is in the area of recycling, it would beg the question, is it that we are wasting time with recycling in Trinidad and Tobago and paying lip service? What accounts for that level of vacancy in recycling and recovery of all areas? That should be the area with the least vacancies.
Right. Actually, what would have happened is that those would have been the latest set of vacancies only because of the ICARE project. The phase 2 of the ICARE project was only launched in January, and because of that, we have identified a number of vacancies. But those vacancies will soon be filled, so that we will no longer have that challenge.
Through you, Chair, how soon can we expect that to be filled?
Definitely by the month of April.
Okay. The other question I want to go to is regarding the Waste Management Authority. How would you reconcile the role of the Waste Management Authority and the EMA, given that the EMA is already fulfilling some, I would like to believe, some of the mandate of an eventual Waste Management Authority? How would you reconcile the work of the EMA as it is featured right now in today's sitting versus the Waste Management Authority?
Right. So, from where I sit, the Environmental Management Authority has authority over the environment. Waste management is more than just the environment, it's also public health, and therefore the Environmental Management Authority, as it stands now, will only have responsibility over one aspect of the total waste management function. The Waste Management Authority will ensure the both on the environmental side as well as the public health side, as well as the other legal issues involved in waste collection. Right now, there's no permitting process for waste management, so anybody can get involved in waste management and buy a truck and park it at his house and say he's a waste collector. Anybody can collect waste and not dispose of it at a landfill site right now, at one of the approved landfill sites. And that is what the Waste Management Authority will do. Also, with respect to recycling, and so there's a definite need for one coordinated approach to recycling. So the individual regional corporations, municipal corporations, they all have interest in in setting up recycling programs and so, but there are some things that need to be done from a coordinated basis, and again, that's where the Waste Management Authority will come in.
All right. I take that as that whatever role EMA is fulfilling today, they may have to give some of that away to the Waste Management Authority. Hold the answer and give it with regard to this question. There's a lot of reports of dumping of sewage in open pits in certain sites, for example, at Beetham, where I assume the rates that they would pay is at variance with what you would pay WASA if you're sending sewage. You can clarify in a response. How is this being handled in terms of the dumping of raw sewage in pits versus at giving it to WASA by contractors? Is there any plans afoot to stop that? And how widespread is it?
I'd like to defer that answer to the Ministry of Planning.
Kindly repeat again, please. Thanks.
Well, first, I wanted to verify that the reports are accurate. The dumping of sewage in open pits, for example, at Beetham, as well as other sites across the country, to ascertain how widespread this dumping of sewage is versus delivering it to WASA, where it would be treated.
I will have to defer to public utilities. I can't speak to the dumping and how widespread it might be. I'm asking if Mr. Romano has had any reports about sewage being dumped in landfills.
Well, perhaps,
Maybe I use the wrong
sorry,
term as by saying landfills.
just a second. Perhaps we could now invite Mr. Joseph to indicate, because as PS in the Ministry of Public Utilities, you may be the person best placed to say whether there have been any reports of dumping of sewage outside of the WASA facilities for treatment of sewage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this point in time, I am not aware of any reports being made to the Ministry of Public Utilities with respect to this particular activity. Based on the concern posed by the Honourable Member, we could do some investigation to see whether or not that is in fact so.
If I may ask the question a different way, can you give an idea as to how sewage is treated? Is it that, okay, we have the WASA facility, and do we have other facilities within which contractors would dispose of sewage? So we understand how it is handled. Maybe the technical terms I used are not in line with what you're accustomed to, the industry jargon.
Thank you, Member. Again, I am not fully aware of how that is done. Again, I could engage WASA on this, and we could provide that answer in writing to you.
Okay. PS, there are just some things that I wanted to clarify with you. What is one of the interesting things about your written submission is that you were talking about the move from waste to recycling to waste to energy production. What exactly is that? Could you explain that in simple terms for our listening and viewing members?
I'll ask the CEO at SWMCOL to trickle.
Perhaps there's a reason you all put him to sit in the middle. That's a hot seat. Certainly.
Right, so there's what is called a waste management hierarchy. The most preferable form of waste management is not to generate waste in the first place. After that, once waste is generated, then you want to reuse as much as possible. Reuse simply means if you have a glass, you use it several times before it becomes waste. Then you have recycling, Recycling involves some reprocessing of waste. So you can take this plastic bottle and you can chip it up and make a new plastic product with it, and that is recycling. Waste to energy comes as the next rung in that hierarchy, which is now taking this bottle and putting it in an incinerator where it is burnt, and that the energy, the heat from that, is used to generate energy, and energy either through electricity, or in some places they can actually use that heat for heating of buildings and so forth. And that's waste to energy. And then the final tier on that waste hierarchy is the disposal. So you want disposal as the last thing that you can do, because there's no benefit to disposal. And in disposal, you have, you know, for the next 100 years, you have to have that waste still around. So that is the waste management hierarchy, which includes recycling and waste energy.
Sure. Well, I think I have realized that perhaps I should leave it to the members attending to determine who will answer what question, because I'm not sure that we are posing our questions to the persons with the particular competence or specialization to deal with it. But you will have to forgive us for that. With respect to the Beetham landfill, one of the things which concerns people is when things are burnt there and the capital city is covered in a haze, and you know, it's a health hazard to people with asthmatic conditions and so on. What is responsible for that? How can it be prevented, if at all, or ameliorated? And what impact is that having on the environment, because it's a swampy area? So there are 3 questions. So I don't know if 3 people will answer it, or if one person may answer all.
Yeah, I can certainly start. The impact of fires. So we spoke previously about the sanitary engineered landfill site. And in any landfilling process, whether it's a sanitary engineered site or not, you need to do at least a certain minimum amount of activities. What we do at Beetham is to compact the waste as much as possible. So when it comes in, we have compaction equipment and tractors that roll over it and compress it into as small a space as possible. And then that needs to be covered with 6 inches of dirt or any kind of topsoil, any kind of inert material. And that's the standard procedure for disposal of waste. And there's a cost to that. The unfortunate thing is that SWMCOL, when we calculate what is required for sanitary disposal of waste, that adds up to $120 million for the 3 sites that we have, based on the amount of hours, based on the amount of waste, based on the fact that we need to compress it and to have 6 inches of dirt to cover the waste. Because of the subvention we receive, we are unable to complete all those operational activities. So what happens is that we are not able to cover the waste as we should, and therefore there are exposed areas of waste that remain, and those are the areas that can catch fire, especially in dry season. And so added to that, we have the issue of salvaging at the 3 landfill sites as well. Salvagers are people who rummage through the waste and they try to take out what they consider still valuable. And because you have that human element in an engineered sanitary landfill site and proper sanitary landfilling procedures, there are not supposed to be any persons on the site. And so because we have that social element, we have increased chances of fires, because they will light fires to burn the copper, the plastic around copper products, and so and that increases the chance of a fire. Notwithstanding that, I mean, since 2014, SWMCOL would have had a major fire in 2014, and since then we have made improvements in terms of reducing the incidence of fires, and we have ensured that as much as possible, especially during the dry season, that the waste is covered, if not 100%, very close to that. But the fact remains we don't have the resources that are required to do proper sanitary engineered landfilling.
Do you have the resources to deal with at least one landfill? Because I would suspect that the Beetham landfill has the greatest impact because of the huge numbers of people coming into the city and environs from all over the country to work every day and to go to school. And also because most of the ministries and, all the things you are required to do in terms of government departments, they are still based in Port of Spain. So the impact of a fire in the Beetham has a very far-reaching consequence. So is it that your subvention can cover at least one?
Yeah, from where we sit, I mean, the challenges at the three landfill sites are equal. Yes, Beetham is close to Port of Spain, but I mean, both Guanapo is, on the outskirts of Arima. Forest Park is upstream to the communities of Springvale and Macaulay, and those communities are affected very, very drastically when we have fires as well. So, I mean, we have, as I said, we have put systems in place at each of the landfill sites to improve what has been occurring. But there is still the chance of the intermittent fire at any one of those sites at particular. I mean, especially in the dry season, of course.
And again, I'm just asking this question because I don't know who may be able to answer it, but biomedical waste, how is that collected and dealt with?
Biomedical waste is a specific, I mean, and sometimes considered hazardous waste. And there are facilities throughout Trinidad, I mean, to deal with biomedical waste, or in some cases, the facilities, the hospitals, like the San Fernando General Hospital, would have their own incineration facilities. So it is not supposed to go to any landfills or get into the normal garbage. It's supposed to be handled by certified people and taken to their facilities to dispose of. And generally is incineration.
If I may just add to that, so, and that's a very important word, supposed to. The reality is there are three major hospitals, and they do have proper systems for the disposal of biomedical waste. One of them incineration, the other two use a private company. But apart from that, there are still a lot of other small medical institutions and so on. There really is not enough control over that situation at this point in time. So on occasion, we do receive biomedical waste. It's usually hidden amongst other types of waste and so, but the reality is, unfortunately, biomedical waste sometimes reaches our landfills.
And in that case, what do you do? How do you separate it and address it?
In those cases, we simply bury it along with the other waste. It's already received. In a lot of cases, we are not aware of, because it's hidden, we are not aware of the particular contractor or truck that has brought it in, and therefore there's very little we can do at that point.
I want to go back to an issue which had been raised by one of the members earlier, and that is to say our rating in terms of how much waste we produce. Now, I was reading somewhere that our rating is affected by the fact that we are tiny islands and we have a petrochemical-based industry. Is that why we are rated so high for waste? For the production of waste?
Right, so I just want to, there has been some misinformation going wrong as of, I think, 2 years ago, 2016, the World Bank unfortunately reported that Trinidad and Tobago had the highest per capita generation in the entire world, and they quoted a figure of 14 plus kilograms per person per day. The reality is that was simply not correct, and what the source of the error was the fact that World Bank took the waste that was generated in the country and divided it by the population of Port of Spain alone. So they came up with an astronomically high figure. If you look at the next in line after us was something like 5.5 kilograms. The reality is our waste generation is 1.5 kilograms per capita, and that is, I mean, in the scheme of things, quite average. So we are not one of the highest producers by any means. In fact, some of our Caribbean counterparts, Barbados in particular, it's quite significantly higher than us. Notwithstanding that, it doesn't mean that we don't, as a society, generate, we do, in fact, generate too much waste. We, of course, are a consumer-oriented society. We import a lot of finished goods, and once you're importing products, it usually comes with a lot of packaging. So our packaging waste is quite high, and of course packaging is voluminous. So it appears to be quite significant in quantity, but from an average basis, as I said, we are very average.
Late news is still good news. That bit of information about our rating is still on the internet. I mean, every now and again you would see somebody plug it in as if it has been newly discovered. And this takes me to my other question. Was anything put out by any of our agencies, in a forceful manner, or let's say on the TV news via an interview or so, to say that, listen, this was done incorrectly and this is where we actually stand? Was anything like that?
Yes, definitely. So we got World Bank to correct their error and to retract that publication. But as you said, I mean, unfortunately, once that news gets out, there's no way for it to come back. So whilst there was a lot of news articles related to the fact that we were the highest generation, when we got the official retraction and got the apology from World Bank, that did not make the news as it should have. So it was in fact, that retraction was in fact carried in at least one of the newspapers, but as I said, it was not as significant as the articles associated with the fact that we were the highest generator.
Well, it seems as though the proposal for a Waste Management Authority will also have to include a PR officer.
Thanks, Chair. I have a question regarding the use of tires, because the whole issue at ICARE is about a culture shift regarding waste management and recycling in Trinidad and Tobago. Is there any plans afoot regarding the use of tires in construction, in road repair and building, etc.? Is there anything for that?
Okay, through the chair. So I get a chance to speak now. Yes, we actually have some downstream industries that we are approaching to reprocess the tires to some sort of value-added products, right? But like everything else, it's very incremental. We also have to go through things like EOIs. We have to do due process to ensure that it's equitable. So construction, of course, things like I don't think I can name the entities, but yes, we have been working with them for road surfacing, for even converting, using it as a form of tire-derived fuel as well. That's another option, and other downstream products. So we are, as you may be aware, in 2014, we purchased a shredder. And waste management has, and recycling has different stages. So the first stage of reprocessing the tires would be just reduce the size of it, size reduction. So we were only able to purchase a shredder for the size reduction. Then the other stage would be to dewire the tires, remove the wire, So that we were not able to reach that stage as yet because of limited financial resources and so, but we are seeking to partner with other agencies or other entities to do that, and then of course to reprocess that to other downstream products.
As a follow-up question, because you mentioned the subvention and its inability to fulfill the requirements of SWMCOL in the mean, specifically regarding the recycling of tires, is any aspect of the environmental tax being applied directly to your subvention, to increase your subvention, to facilitate those projects you mentioned?
Unfortunately, no, not at this point. And again, that certainly is one of the disconnects. So we have shredding operations, and we charge for our shredding operations. So people would arrange for us to collect their tires. We'll shred it at a fee. And there are a number of companies that willingly pay the fee, and of course they charge it back to their customers. And so the challenge now with the tire tax is that the tire taxes has been implemented, and now those same companies are asking us, well, why am I still paying SWMCOL a fee if I'm now paying a tire tax? So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. We are working with, of course, our ministry to try to resolve that in terms of how best that tire tax can, in fact, work for the benefit of the environment.
Follow up regarding that. If a company still wishes to get their tires shredded, how much will they have to pay per tire, depending on the class of tire?
Right. We have a tiered rate ranging from $10, starting at $10, and based on quantity going down to $5.
One of the senators some time ago had been talking about using recycled tires to patch holes in roads. Is that actually taking place? And who is doing it?
It's not taking place now. One of the reasons it's not taking place is that what we're doing is just shredding the tires, and we don't have a system for removing the metal in the tires. So there are many tires that are steel belted, and there's wire or metal in it to properly resurface roads, and so you have to have a system that removes that metal. So as Maria would have discussed, we're working with companies now to see how best we can further process those tires so that we can have the metal separated from the rubber. And once we do that, then we can have the host of downstream products, including downstream projects, including use for resurfacing roads.
Well, are you aware of anyone using this with or without wires, using old tires to patch roads? A private company?
Is that, you mean locally?
Yes.
No, it's not happening locally.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask, and I'm not so sure if anybody here might be in a position to give an answer to this, but is there a system to track toxic chemicals coming into the country and to track distribution and disposal of those chemicals?
And I'm sure David will help me, Dr. Prasad will help me, but under the Basel Convention for Transboundary Movement of Waste, and the ministry is the focal point, and the EMA is the competent authority. Before any waste moves through Trinidad, you have all these various forms to fill out, and we need to, give approval for the waste to enter Trinidad. Our national environmental policy as it exists, is very clear that no waste is to be imported into Trinidad and Tobago. That's a clear statement in the NEP. And therefore, waste is generally not imported in Trinidad and Tobago. If it's happening, we're not aware of it. If it's happening, because you're supposed to register through the Basel Convention, for which we're signatories of. You're supposed to do the registration and get all the approvals from the EMA, who's the competent authority.
Well, I'm not sure. Perhaps I use the word waste when I should have used another. What I'm asking about is the importation of potentially toxic chemicals, for example, things that you may find in fertilizers, cleaning agents, and so on and so forth.
We also have the toxic pesticides and toxic whatever it is board, which is under the Ministry of Agriculture, and they, register products before they come in. And they do a full registration. So that board is the authority for that.
Dr. Prasad.
Oh, sorry, Ministry of Health, not Ministry of Agriculture. Yeah.
Dr. Prasad, you wanted to say something?
Just to elaborate, we also, with the Basel Convention, what the CEO of the EMA indicated is right. So we are working with the Ministry of the Attorney General to look towards putting, at least give some legislative background by putting these things on the negative import and export list. Right now, we work through the Basel Competent Authorities notification. So the Basel Convention really is one of the main tenets is to make sure that countries are informed prior to waste being shipped to them, so that make sure they could handle it locally. And so if we have to export waste, we have to notify Basel competent authorities in the receiving countries and get consent in that regard. So we're looking towards having some kind of legislative framework in place to give the force of law to the Basel Convention nationally.
Thank you very much. So I want to say that the submission from Planning and Development was very comprehensive, because one of the things we set out to do was to conduct the inquiry into waste management policies. And I think reading it, we have a very good understanding of at the high level, the way Vision 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals, which we've endorsed as a government, and as it filters down, the national environmental policy and all of that. But the most important thing is down at the end, when question number 8, where you asked about the legislation, and Mr. Roach has spoken about the Waste Management Authority. So how far advanced are we in putting this new legislation before the Parliament?
It's sorry to sound like this, but the Ministry of Planning and Development took this process to a certain point, and then it was handed over to the Ministry of Public Utilities.
Do we have a comment from the Ministry of Public Utilities on the matter?
Madam Chair, the waste recycling policy is an approved policy. With regards to the waste recycling bill and the corresponding legislation with the Bottled Beverage Containers Act and all those other pieces of legislation, they are far advanced, and that is being taken up by the Ministry of the Attorney General. The Ministry of Public Utilities was responsible for ensuring that SWMCOL has the organizational structure that will be able to deliver the mandate as envisioned by the role and responsibilities for the Waste Recycling Authority.
That answers your question. Thank you. Okay, we have 2 questions from members of the public. The first is, where can the public get information on the proper way to dispose of certain types of waste and other materials, such as motor vehicle oil after an oil change or motor vehicle tires? Is there a proper way, and is there any incentive for persons such as mechanics to do so? So that's from the first person who's communicated with us. Who is going to take that question, or those three questions?
So certainly they can contact SWMCOL. It's not that we have information available on our website, but they can certainly send an inquiry to us and we can direct them. There are systems in place at present, private sector companies that are involved in the collection of waste oil, as well as there are private sector companies that are involved in being able to return your tires for eventual processing by SWMCOL. So we can provide them with that information based on their location through email.
What's your email address? What's the email address of SWMCOL?
SWMCOL info. So info at SWMCOL, you can send it to that, or you can send it directly to myself, which is dmanswell@swmcol.com.
dmanswell@swmcol.com. Great, excellent. The second one is, what efforts are being made by any of the entities appearing to encourage and educate the public on disposal of waste according to types, metal, organic, plastic, and paper, to allow for downstream recycling? Well, I know that we have, to some extent, already touched on those issues, but can somebody give us a sort of sound bite so that the viewer or listener may be able to appreciate better what has been said thus far?
We have quite a good website, and the iCare project is on the website, and it really gives gives members of the public very clear information in terms of how you can handle waste, what some of the best waste handling methodologies, and also, I mean, where our facilities, where our bins are located in terms of delivering their recyclables. And it clearly states what recyclables should be placed in bags and where they're located. So I think, I mean, if they go to our website, and you can also contact us, because there is a button to contact us on the website, and it's www.ema.co.tt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Romano. What I wanted to ask is this. You know, audit is a word used in different contexts these days. But in terms of the iCare project, are there sort of audits being done to say, okay, we expected to be at this particular stage at this time, this is where we are? Are we ahead? Are we behind? If we are ahead, well, that's fantastic. We should let the public know. If we are behind, are we analyzing the reason for that? Are there such audits being done on the project?
I think not only the EMA, I think, but government on the whole, you know, have trying to establish monitoring and evaluation, because you want to know what are the gaps, you want to know how to move forward. So in our 2018 NEP, which we're happy to state went to the minister this week, so hopefully within a month's time, I mean, we should have a new or revised national environmental policy in Trinidad and Tobago, which will speak to waste and the importance of us doing something different with respect to waste. And in that NEP, I mean, we now actually, I mean, planning to have an action plan and monitoring and evaluation framework. So every agency that has responsibilities in the national environmental policy will have to give how they are going to proceed to ensure that the actions in the NEP are fulfilled and report. And similarly, with respect to the eye care project, I mean, we realized that one of the things that we weren't doing is monitoring and evaluating. And now we're actually putting in place a framework with our partners, including SWMCOL, the ministries, public utilities, everybody else, in terms of what are the goals and when they will be achieved. And that, again, should happen, I mean, within the next 3 months or so.
Thank you. Sure.
I just want to ask a question, just a general question. How far are we from separation of waste at the homes, at the residential, from the residential users? So, for example, you have this color garbage bag for glass bottles, this color garbage bag for plastic, this color garbage bag for food waste. Or are we getting there? If not, by what year we think we should reach there?
Thank you. Through the Chair, basically what we have done, and we alluded to it earlier in this conversation, we had a pilot project with the Tunapuna-Piako Regional Corporation where we educated the public on the separation of waste at source, whereby you separate your recyclables, and you place it at the curb for collection. This is in support of the eye care project, because while eye care have the 81 bins and we are partners with them, you will appreciate the fact that some individual might just want to come at their gap and place their recyclables at the curb. So in answering your question, thus far we have had great support for this initiative, so much so that we have 2 other regional corporations who came on board, and the population is ready to embrace and accept this process. What we mentioned earlier in our conversation, and I believe the PS for planning alluded to, or some of the mechanisms, and what SWMCOL has put in place with the new municipal waste contracts going out. We have a component which is adopting the same TPRC model, whereby the population will be advised of placing your recyclables at your curb. Similar to what happens abroad, place your recyclables at your curb, and we will. Thus far, we're looking at Wednesdays for doing this. In our conversation with the regional corporation, we're looking at Wednesdays, but it's what is amenable for the corporation. So in answering your question, yes, the population is ready. Yes, we have implemented our model, and the model has been working, and we believe with just the right systems that in place, you can see this going throughout Trinidad and Tobago.
If I might add, Chair.
Certainly, Ms. Khan.
We have also started to encourage separation at the workplace. So PS Hinds would have alluded to the fact that the Ministry of Public Utilities, in collaboration with SWMCOL and the EMA and MTS, initiated the public sector recycling program earlier this year. And we have targeted in this first phase of 1 year, 7 ministries that are headquartered in Port of Spain, so that we can begin the drive to separate, and indeed focusing on beverage containers as a first step. And that process now is going to be extended into the private sector, starting with the commercial banking sector. And the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, which will launch in their own effort, will take place by the middle of April, and Central Bank will become a partner with the ministry and SWMCOL to take it to the financial sector. And thereafter, the program will be taken out to different sectors of the economy, focusing on separation at the workplace to encourage recycling.
Okay, before I ask for the closing statements, I just want to go back to an issue raised by the Vice Chairman, which is to say, he spoke about the photographs that people are of a dump site that people are passing by every day on their way to work. Is there anything or any authority which can simply go and remove what is there, take it to a landfill, and charge the owner of the property? Is that a possibility or a way of possible resolution of a situation like that?
As far as I'm aware, that falls under the remit of the municipal corporations, and they do have that authority to do that. Again, it comes back to the situation of who owns the property and that sort of thing. And then there's also the complication of you may have a piece of property that you're not using and somebody else comes and throws waste in your property. So, how do you deal with that? But as I said, it falls under the remit of the municipal corporations.
Yeah, I want to ask a follow-up regarding that. Because I went to look at some land at a time when I was working at a cooperative in a prior incarnation in Central. I think it's Chickland is the area. And the land is beautiful, but at the side of the hill, you're seeing waste. And the guys at the cooperative were saying that people are coming and they created their own landfill sites, dumping home appliances and stuff like that. How many of these types of ad hoc landfills, if you want to call them that we have in Trinidad and Tobago, and what processes the ordinary citizen can take if let's say, they decide to take out a smartphone, take a picture of the person who's doing this. Of course, it's maybe the crowd may be dumping. It may not be an organized effort, but can the ordinary citizen, just as we have 800 tips for crime, can the ordinary citizen now be a whistleblower, and to whom, to get this phenomenon ended?
The ordinary citizen should do that because, I think we need to do more naming and shaming. I think that's important. In terms of the law, there is the Litter Act, there is the Nuisance Act. All of these are summary, convictions that the lawyers amongst us could tell us, so much more about. And really, it's through the regional corporations and through the police. You can also, of course, contact the EMA, and we either through our environmental police unit or through the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, we'll contact them and try to get some sort of conviction. However, in this case, the person has to be caught, doing the activity. And Chairman, to end on a good note, on a high note, action was taken in Carlson Field by the Commissioner of State Lands. The person on January the 5th was given notice to vacate the property, and I suspect the Commissioner is going through the process in terms of getting the person to vacate the property. Their legislation, of course, is superior legislation to our rules. And therefore, we have basically deferred to the Commissioner to continue with the process. We will continue communicating with the Commissioner as we do with all the other agencies. But I think it speaks to the fact that the coordination amongst the agencies is improving.
And Chair, might I add another approach as well? This is quite excellent, but data has always shown that the kind of areas that you spoke about, areas that people have traditionally been dumping in, sometimes when communities come together after it's cleaned, if the space remains almost vacant, I have seen some communities where they started to plant flowers, even trees, put down a few logs as pretend benches, and showed that they were owning the space. It helped deter the natural sort of habit of dumping. Now, that can't work all the time, but that too is something else that can be done by communities as well.
Vice Chairman has
I just wanted to make the point about the Carlson Field. Commissioner of State Lands operates in the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. I was there on December 21st, and the Commissioner took steps in January. But there are other agencies with responsibility for what happened and is still happening on the site. And that is the matter I was addressing, that the land issue is one, but the activity remains on the site.
Okay. This has been a fairly long and quite intense session. I know that the members have learned a lot, and I'm sure our viewing and listening public has also learned a lot. So I'm going to ask for closing remarks, but I'm going to ask for it in a different order from when we began. So May I invite Mr. Joseph to make a few closing remarks?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and for allowing us the opportunity to come here today and share with you various aspects of what the inquiries are concerned about. In going forward, I think it has been made quite clear that we can't continue to operate in these silos, as it were. There needs to be a greater level of coordination between the various agencies. And in going back to the drawing board, we will need to look at that very carefully in order to really get a better, stronger approach on how we treat with waste management within Trinidad and Tobago. We will continue to provide the support to our line agency, SWMCOL, in its efforts in going forward, whether or not it's through the creation of the engineered sanitary disposal sites, as well as the creation of transfer stations and recovery facilities, the building of public awareness, cost recovery. All those are areas we will continue to provide that support to SWMCOL in its efforts to deliver on its mandate. And like I said, we will continue to work with the other agencies in taking this process forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Roach?
Yeah, so we certainly, have been glad to be part of these discussions, and we hope that it helps to enlighten the members as well as the public as to the situation with waste management. We encourage people to be part of the solution as well. So whereas a lot of people look to the agencies here for the solutions, the public has a great part to play in getting involved, becoming responsible citizens or becoming more responsible citizens, playing a part in the iCare programs and the other available programs. I mean, besides iCare, there are a number of other available recycling programs, and so get involved, get active, and we will continue to do our parts. We will continue to strive for change in the waste management sector. But I do think there's a lot of hope in having quick changes that can see very tangible results in the very near future.
Well, that sounds quite positive. Ms. Hinds?
And to continue with that positivity, the Ministry of Planning and Development and its sister agencies are quite determined and serious about its responsibility in terms of not only developing the policy, the overarching policy, which we have done, but tracking it and seeing the extent to which these policies are effective and as efficient as we'd hope it would be. And we are doing that through the National Performance Framework. I also wanted to signal that in Vision 2030, we did speak of going in the direction of one landfill. So you did express you shared some thoughts that it seemed to make sense to put your resources where, in one. And that is the intent. It has been signaled. So again, we just wanted to thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to participate. We suspect that we may be here again. We are not certainly sure, but we are happy to continue to collaborate to achieve the outcomes that we all want.
Thank you. What I'm going to suggest, because I know we've covered a pretty wide area, and we've covered a number of agencies and their different responsibilities. I appreciate that in answering some of the questions, you were concerned about simplicity and abbreviation because you realized that you couldn't go into full depth or in-depth answers to some of the questions that were posed to you. I invite you, without Mr. Ogilvie, who is the head of the secretariat for this committee, I invite you, if you think that this committee would be informed by other material which you have in your possession with respect to any of the projects or any of the solutions that you see, I invite you to send them in writing to us so that we may benefit from your scholarship, because clearly the different entities have done quite a bit of work, and this committee would benefit from your work. So if you are so minded, we would be most grateful to accept. I also at this stage want to thank the media, the persons in the public gallery, and the viewing and listening audience. There being no other business, this meeting is now adjourned.